Welcome, everyone, to the Information's TITV. My name is Akash Pasricha. It is Monday, August 17th. Today on the show, Nvidia is backing OpenAI and SB Energy's massive new Ohio data center with roughly $100 billion in guarantees. We'll unpack that deal and Nvidia's SB Energy investment with our Nvidia reporter shortly. We'll then unpack new reporting that we have on the Tesla Roadster. And we're going to close out the show with a discussion on Dario Amodei's latest thoughts on AI regulation and the debate around AI centralization that has made waves on X for much of the weekend. It's going to be a great show, so let's get right on into it. Nvidia announced this morning it will provide a financial guarantee for the lease on a new Ohio data center that is expected to amount to 10 gigawatts of new power capacity. The company also announced it will take a stake in the data center developer SB Energy. My colleagues Phoebe Liu, Valida Pao, and Ann Davis-Vaughn had exclusive details about much of that investment over the weekend. I want to bring on Phoebe to walk us through what we need to know. Phoebe, welcome back to the show. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Good to be here.
Okay, so we are getting right to it this morning with a big deal that NVIDIA has announced. There was a lot in this press release, and of course, you and Blida and Anne reported many of these details over the weekend. What did they announce this morning? Let's start there.
Yes, so Nvidia, OpenAI, and SB Energy basically announced that they've finalized the agreement for OpenAI to lease data center and power capacity that SB Energy is building, and that will house NVIDIA hardware. So that's kind of the incentive for NVIDIA to say that it will guarantee a lot of the powered shell, so data center power and land lease agreements that OpenAI has signed, because basically OpenAI doesn't have the credit to be able to kind of lease that on its own and convince lenders to back it. So it would need kind of an investment grade company with a strong balance sheet such as NVIDIA to back it. And yeah, so they're partnering to
But
build out.
NVIDIA didn't
Yeah,
say the amount. Importantly, though, they didn't say the amount today in the press release, right? Of the
they
guarantee.
didn't in the press release, but it actually came out in a regulatory filing a
Okay.
few minutes afterward. The total exposure is about 105 billion, which importantly is not the amount that NVIDIA is paying, but it's the amount that NVIDIA would help guarantee, and that would low over time. We can get into that later, but it's pretty close to the amount that Valida, Ann, and I reported on Friday of around 100 billion.
And just to make sure that we get the details here correctly, so OpenAI has SB Energy, the energy company that is backed by SoftBank, they're the ones that are developing the data center. They need a tenant, which is OpenAI. OpenAI has committed to a lease for this facility, and in doing that, they've said, "Build it, we will come." They need some sort of a guarantor, I guess, as we've talked about on this show. It's much like the New
Yeah.
York City rent guarantors. NVIDIA has come to the rescue. Has NVIDIA ever made a guarantee of this size before?
I think this is pretty unprecedented in terms of size. However, NVIDIA's previous guarantees are a bit more airtight than this one. So, for example, in September 2025, NVIDIA said it would buy back all of CoreWeave's unsold GPU capacity. So, this means if CoreWeave doesn't sell this capacity, NVIDIA would have to buy 100% of it back at some kind of rate that it's determined. The way this one works is a little bit different. So, if something were to happen, if OpenAI uh, hope this doesn't happen, but defaults on its lease in some way or can't make XYZ payments, NVIDIA wouldn't directly take over the lease. They would try to, they as in kind of the companies collectively, would try to find another tenant to lease whatever capacity that OpenAI can't pay for at some rate. And NVIDIA's guarantee covers like a very low base rate. So what NVIDIA would do in this case is to step in and kind of cover the difference, which hopefully would be much, much lower than the 105 billion that is kind of its maximum exposure as part of the
Right.
deal. Sense.
Now, $100 billion, you had some good reporting over the weekend on how we got to that point. Was it always 100 billion? There was a discussion earlier a couple months ago that it could have been even more than that at one point, right?
Yeah, so it depends on who you ask. Some people really don't. Yeah, basically, in late July, the Wall Street Journal reported that the guarantee could be as high as 250 billion. Some people are very insistent that this amount has not been scaled back, but rather phased into two parts. So now the initial guarantee covers the first 4.5 gigawatts of the data center. There's a second phase that would be 3.75 gigawatts that NVIDIA is technically not on the hook for yet. So basically, if it's been phased, the initial amount that NVIDIA is guaranteeing is inherently much less than what was described before. And I think different people have different interpretations as to whether this means NVIDIA is kind of worried about or kind of taking precautions as to not use too much of its balance sheet directly upfront to help its customers buy NVIDIA hardware. But I think NVIDIA is more and more putting out the message that it wants to make sure and signal to investors that it's being very financially disciplined and kind of capping the amount of exposure of any particular deal that it itself would be liable for. So in the Ohio deal, it's about 25%, according to a couple of people I talked to who are involved in the deal.
You talked about the NVIDIA hardware, so the chips in all this. I just want to make sure I understand here. Where do the chip purchases fit into this story? I mean, I think you mentioned it would take $500 billion in total to construct this facility. So $100 billion is it's a proportion of that. So they're not covering the whole thing. But regardless of however much they're covering, just are they covering loans that would then be purchases of their own hardware, or how do the chip purchases fit into this? Do we know?
Yeah, so today's announcement, I think, specifies that the 100 billion would just cover the powered shell. It's kind of unclear where exactly
So
the chips
just the
would fall.
PowerShell means just the data center.
The data center, the power, the land, kind of the
Okay.
buildings that would be constructed, which is also pretty expensive. But the chips are important because they're even more expensive. And yeah, would take a lot of debt because OpenAI doesn't have that much cash right now to be able to afford. So I think my sense is that they would need separate financing, either slightly overlapping with this deal or completely separate, which is part of the broader discussion around kind of how NVIDIA announced last week that it's partnering with these 5 Wall Street giants to uh, help raise third parties with non-NVIDIA capital to help NVIDIA customers finance purchases of its chips and other hardware.
Okay, so this is actually kind of staggering. I didn't really put the pieces together here, but so you've got this $500 billion data center that is being built in Ohio. Nvidia is saying, "Hey, we'll put up $100 billion if things go south to cover the lease commitments." But then there's $500 billion in additional financing that Nvidia is basically working with Wall Street on. And we know that chips are, I think there's a stat out there. Chips are like 60% of the cost of a data center in the end. So this is kind of a staggering amount of capital that is being committed here. Um, I want to talk about the second half of the story here. So NVIDIA is also taking a stake in SB Energy, the data center developer. Who is SB Energy, and what should we make of this investment?
Yeah, so SB Energy has its roots in kind of power generation, power development, but it acquired a data center company late last year. So now it's kind of doing both the power and the data center development itself. It is majority owned by SoftBank, trying to go public kind of shortly, probably, hopefully this year. And also kind of OpenAI and now NVIDIA have pretty major stakes in the company. So it's kind of this central player, one step removed from kind of NVIDIA's direct customer in the supply chain that would be necessary to make this 10 gigawatt Ohio project possible. And part of SB Energy's connection to the project also involves relationships with the Japan government and the US government as part of trade negotiations from earlier this year. So there's kind of a government component to this as well. So NVIDIA's $1.5 billion investment, uh, I wouldn't say it's exactly circular because it's not directly to an NVIDIA customer, but it's all kind of pretty intertwined, if that makes sense. And
Right.
we
Although
reported
you
on,
could
yeah,
say
go ahead.
you could say, I mean, it's not to an NVIDIA customer, but I mean, if they're going to build the
Mm.
data centers that
Right.
tenants uh, take leases in to buy Nvidia. It's not as circular. Let's put it that way. It's not as circular.
Yeah, but I think the some people think that this equity investment would help incentivize NVIDIA to also guarantee the second phase of this project, which is also key.
And you also reported that it's $1.5 billion that they've committed right now in terms of an investment. There could be more money coming, perhaps.
Could be another 1.5 billion at the IPO, according to some of the people we spoke to, and that would, if the numbers that SB Energy is trying to raise at the IPO doesn't change very much, that would make NVIDIA one of the largest investors in the IPO, which is also interesting.
Right. So let me ask you a broader question here, Phoebe. I mean, we see all these deals coming together. How risky are they? What do they tell us broadly about NVIDIA's strategy? Is it more of the same, or are these now nuanced ways that NVIDIA is trying to insert itself into the AI build out?
Yeah, so I think both for this powered shell lease guarantee and the 500 billion partnership NVIDIA announced with the big asset managers a little while ago, NVIDIA is trying to cap its risk at 25%. So I think they're making a very intentional step to kind of signal that they want to cap their direct risk to all of this. And I think if you asked Jensen, he would say there's no risk of default. Like they're just because demand so far outpaces supply right now. I think from NVIDIA's perspective, the chance that they will even have to pay any of this backstopping is close to zero. I think other people may see it differently. I think bond traders' assessment of NVIDIA's credit risk has gone up over the last few months, and that kind of is a signal of investors being a little bit worried that maybe the whole AI ecosystem is becoming too hinged on NVIDIA. So that's a metric that we should continue to watch going forward.
Great. Well, Phoebe, I want to thank you for coming on. That is Phoebe Liu, our NVIDIA reporter here at The Information. Will your Tesla be able to fly? The Information has exclusive reporting that Tesla has big plans for its Roadster vehicle. Our Elon Musk reporter, Grace Kay, wrote that story. I want to bring her on to walk us through some of her great reporting. Grace, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Okay, so give us a bit of the backstory here. I mean, the Tesla Roadster, this was a car that initially was unveiled over a decade ago. Um, we heard a little bit about it, but then we sort of drifted into Model S, Model X land, et cetera. We stopped hearing about the Roadster. Give us a little bit of the history, and then we'll talk about your reporting shortly.
Yeah, so the Roadster has arguably the longest history of any product at Tesla. The very first Roadster was unveiled in the 2000s, and it was Tesla's first car. It was also, the very first vehicle was delivered to Elon Musk. And then in 2017, Elon Musk surprised everyone at Tesla by unveiling, all the Tesla fans by unveiling the Roadster, a revamped version of this Roadster in 2017. At the time, they started, accepting reservations and saying that the car would be available for delivery by 2020. 2020 came and went, and the car has been delayed at least 8 times since then. So it's kind of Tesla's longest running, delayed product.
And we should say, I mean, the Roadster, the vision here was this is sort of the sports car version of the Tesla. This was supposed to be the higher end, Lamborghini type of vehicle, right?
Yeah, it's a very niche product. It's supposed to be like their top of the line performance car, exactly designed to
Yeah.
like compete with Lamborghini, McLaren.
How many did they end up selling ever in that first generation of the Roadster?
The first generation of the Roadster, they sold a few thousand units, and it actually helped put them on the map. It, what led up to their IPO. It was a major product for them. This revamped Roadster has kind of been less of a priority because they've since moved into making, mainstream cars for the average user, much cheaper vehicles like the Model 3 and the Model Y. So the Roadster is much more niche, and isn't going to sell as many units because it's expected to be hundreds of thousands, if not for this, specialized version that they're making millions of dollars.
And so let's talk about the specialized version. So you have some exclusive reporting on what Tesla and Elon are working on with this specialized new vehicle. What have you found?
Yeah, I found that this project has gone through a lot of different changes over time. So there's the 2017 vehicle we saw, which seemed like a traditional sports car. Musk said at the time it's going to be the fastest production car ever made. Since then, the design has completely evolved. It's gone through a few different stages. At one point, they tried to stretch out this and make this a true four-seater on top of the Model S Plaid. I think they decided that looked a little goofy. And then they went into, trying to make some designs inspired by the Lamborghini Countach, which is this very angular vehicle. And then at one point, they were even exploring designs similar to an SR-71 Blackbird, which is this spy plane from the Cold War era. It's very unique looking. Now I'm told that, the design is a little bit more conservative than that, but very different from the 2017 car we saw.
But okay, so but let's not bury the lead here. So I mean, they're trying to make it fly? Like what is that what you
Yeah.
mean by spy plane?
So Elon Musk has been saying that this car is going to fly for a while, and he's said pretty openly that it's part of a project with SpaceX using these cold air thrusters, that are going to send it into the air. At Tesla, I think their immediate reaction to that was like, what are we doing here? What is this going to look like? 'Cause obviously a very unusual car. Um, and that idea,
And what does fly really mean in this I mean, what should we expect here? Like, are we talking about a runway? Are we talking about I mean, you said something about, like, hovering in the story. Like, what does flying mean in this context?
Yeah, that was a question I had for a lot of people, and it sounds like the idea of what it means to fly evolved over time. So I think initially they were thinking like almost like an aircraft car, very similar to this spy plane. And then I think, those ideas became a little more conservative over time, and the idea now is it's more hovering in the air. So as recently as, like, earlier this year when they were practicing for this elaborate stunt to unveil, the specialized version of the Roadster, they had it driving down a ramp, going upside down, detaching from this ramp and hovering upside down, righting itself, and then eventually coming back down. It wasn't necessarily gonna fly, miles and miles or go
Sorry,
long
so
distances.
am I don't know if I'm understanding. It goes like this, and then it kinda like it hovers like that?
Yeah, it
Is
was
that
explained
is
to me as kind of like a roller coaster structure.
okay.
That it's gonna go on a ramp, and then it's eventually gonna be
And then
upside.
it stays upside, maybe it flips around
Yeah, it flips
type
upside
thing.
down. This ramp is
Okay.
magnetized, so the magnets release, it's upside down, it rights itself in the air. I mean, this was as of earlier this year. It sounds like some of the stunt plans might have evolved since then because they've showed Elon Musk the demo a few times, and he's obviously had some notes.
So, okay, let's talk about, I mean, the reality of the situation on the ground. So you had reporting that they are working towards this, maybe an event of sorts, where they could unveil this. When is that event expected? And ultimately, what does that mean for, the actual product? I mean, I went on the website today. You can still reserve the Roadster. It's $5,000, and then within 10 days, $45,000 in a wire transfer to secure your spot. I think people have been waiting here. You said in your story for almost a decade now. Is this thing ever going to get sold?
I mean, that's a great question. So this stunt was supposed to happen, at the beginning of the year. Elon Musk said it was going to happen in April. Now, I'm hearing it could happen as soon as this month, but I wouldn't hold my breath if it got delayed just because it's such an elaborate stunt and this product has kind of proven not to be a high priority for Tesla.
Okay. And you also said in the story, I mean, this vehicle that they've designed as of per now, I mean, it's not a street legal vehicle. I mean, this is very much, I mean, what's going to be collectible, I guess.
Yeah, so I think the idea is there's 2 versions of the Roadster. So some people put down $50,000 deposits. That would be for a Roadster that, wouldn't fly. Some people very early on put $250,000 deposits down for a specialized version, and the idea is this would be the specialized version. And there has been some internal discussion at Tesla about having this be a track-only car that you could use at a track, you'd keep at a track because it's not street legal. And right now, you can't even ride in it because the cold air thrusters have so much noise and vibration that it could burst your eardrums if you were too close.
I hate it when that happens. I hate when I get in the car and the cold air thrusters are just so dang loud. Although I will say here in New York City, I'm pretty sure they have cold air thrusters on some of those vehicles out there because they are pretty loud already sometimes. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the strategy here. So, Tesla, SpaceX, we've written extensively about the collaboration between the two companies. Does this hint anything to us in terms of a possible merger between the two?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just another example of them collaborating together. There were rumors at one point at Tesla, like what if this could be the perfect event to say that we are going to have a merger? But obviously, that's just speculation, and this
Right.
is another one of many examples of them working together.
Okay. And very quickly, Grace, before I let you go, I mean, speaking of SpaceX, so the Cursor deal has now closed. So Cursor is officially part of SpaceX. And just to pivot here slightly, what are the big reporting questions that you're trying to find answers to about this acquisition? Because this is one that we've been watching for a long time as well.
hmm Yeah, I think the biggest question is kind of how will Cursor be able to allow XAI to catch up to all its competitors because they've been lagging behind? What will that look like in practice and, how will that play out? I'm also curious about the leadership structure. How will, Michael and Aman and the leaders at Cursor fit into XAI now and what will that look like going forward? And I think, I'll definitely be keeping an eye out to see how is this going to impact the product roadmap going forward.
Great. Grace, I want to thank you for coming on. It was a great story. I encourage everyone to read it. That is Grace Kay, our Elon Musk reporter, and for the day, our aviation correspondent here at The Information. To close out the show, I want to unpack a debate that has been brewing over X this weekend. A string of posts from the All In podcast and technology investor Gavin Baker prompted Anthropic CEO to publish a long post on his thoughts around regulation. To break that down, I want to bring on Leo Schwartz, our tech and politics reporter. Leo, welcome back to the show. Happy Monday.
Thanks for having me. Always fun to talk about subtweets.
And the meta debates. We were talking this morning about the debate and the meta debate that is going on in AI right now. I want to get to all of it. So, look, what prompted this post from Dario over the weekend?
Yeah, so Dario, not a big, I guess I can't even say tweeter anymore, sub poster on
Xer,
X.
Xer.
Uh, but he got prompted by this appearance by Gavin Baker on All In, and this tweet from or post from Gavin Baker where he basically said that he'd heard from multiple reliable sources that Anthropic and Dario have said that Anthropic is going to be the only company in this new AI future. And this just goes with this broader fear that you're seeing across tech that Anthropic not only is building the best models, but is trying to do this form of regulatory capture in such a way that there will be no other winners, that they'll make this future where they're the only company left, either by their own technical capability or the lobbying they're doing in DC in such a way that they create such constraints that no other companies can even compete. Dario, of course, did not agree with that, this idea that they're trying to do regulatory capture. And you saw this long post, although interestingly, he did not dispute the idea that he has said at some point that Anthropic will be the only company left, and
Well,
that was
founders
pointed
say
out.
a lot of things when they're
Yeah,
fundraising. Okay,
that's true.
so I mean, I don't know. Is it that big a deal? It's not the greatest thing to say, but he's got to raise a ton of money. So whatever he needs to do to get the bag, as they say. Um, so one of the things that stood out to me about this post was this whole idea that people equate regulation with regulatory capture with centralization of power. And I guess this is the idea that when there are regulations, companies with the deepest pockets, they have the most lobbyists in DC. They can sort of bend the rule, or not bend the rule. They can shape the rules to benefit them the most. I guess as you've been covering DC, is this generally the case? And is there evidence that this is the way that the AI story is going from what you've seen?
And I think the debate around this AI framework that we talk about ad nauseum is a good lens into this question, where basically, if you only have three companies really at this point that are building at the frontier level, OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google, and then whatever regulatory body or agency or branch is creating regulation to deal with the frontier, then it's going to be written with those three companies in mind. And I think the fear is if basically Anthropic is defining what frontier is, and the system that's created is written with Anthropic in mind, then it might be impossible for any other company to even build a frontier model, or because Anthropic's already at the frontier, if another company has to start going through these regulatory hurdles, then they'll never actually catch up. What Dario said in response is that's not true. Not all regulation is this idea of regulatory capture where the leading companies are the ones setting the rules. He said that everything they've lobbied for has been trying to make sure that other companies can catch up and that the regulation is only really restricting the ones that are at the leading edge. In other words, they're the ones who have to go through these extra hurdles, and the smaller companies, the ones building in open weights, will have less constraints as they're trying to catch up. This is still an open question. I think David Sachs, obviously, who used to be the lead AI policy person in the Trump administration, had an interesting retort where he said, essentially, no, like it's clear that in history, regulation isn't only done to protect the public, it's also done because the companies with the most power, with the most money, with the most lobbyists have undue influence in shaping how supervisory programs by the government are actually put into place. So I don't know.
Right.
It is an interesting debate.
And I mean, I guess on the flip side of this idea where regulations are supposed to help the smaller companies grow and maybe equalize the playing field a little bit. There's also the flip side of this argument, which is that no, any regulation for American companies, period, will make it easier for companies from China, for example, to grow without regulation, and that inherently puts America at a disadvantage. I mean, this is kind of the other side of the argument that a lot of people have been talking about, right?
Yeah, and what David Sachs said was funny because he said, "I'm not against all regulation." Obviously, he champions this hands-off approach. He said, "I am looking at antitrust as one potential area." And maybe that would be good for Anthropic. So this idea that one company shouldn't get too powerful. But no, that's completely right. I mean, if you have regulation in the US and it only
Yeah.
affects US companies, but you have a lot of US companies using Chinese open weight models that won't be touched by U.S. regulation, then that obviously disadvantages all these other U.S. companies that are trying to build here.
Let me ask you one slightly different question. So we talk about the pushback against AI labs here, and Anthropic is at the center of it. Anthropic is very much in the lead right now, so they have become sort of the punching bag, I guess, if you will, for the industry. I mean, we just finished talking to Phoebe about Nvidia and all the ways that its tentacles have stretched into the AI ecosystem. Nvidia's product is the undisputed leader. I mean, there's no race here at all, right? And I wonder if people in DC that you talk to, or people in that orbit, do they have any of the same criticisms of the big players in the chip sector of Nvidia? Because it feels like, um, I mean, Nvidia people are kind of throwing their hands up in the air, saying, "Yeah, they are the clear winner here, but there's no solution to it. But also maybe there's not anything that can be done." I don't know.
Well, I think it depends on what you're talking about the winner in, right? Like the most of the AI policy debate the past few months has been about cyber risks that people realized after the release of Mythos. So it's very much been about frontier models and the potential of what models can do and what happens if you have these incredibly powerful models in the hands of just a few private companies. And right now, that is really just OpenAI and Anthropic and maybe Google. So that's what this debate is around, I think. NVIDIA, as you said, is the leader in chips. They have the best product in chips. They're incredibly important on this infrastructure level. And I do think you've seen this criticism when it comes to chip exports, this idea that maybe NVIDIA is really determining how chip exports are being handled under Trump, this idea that
Right.
they're really trying to open up the sale of their chips to China because obviously that's profitable for them and maybe very important to their bottom line. But right now, this debate is really about frontier models, and this. I mean, it's an existential threat to so much, from biorisk to cyber to jobs, and I think that's why Anthropic has such a big target on their back, where Nvidia might not right now.
Right, and I guess, I shouldn't say that it's not like NVIDIA has been without criticism. I mean, people have put Jensen in a similar spot here, when it comes to defending, their technology and trade export, stances and stuff like that. So, there's certainly that Jensen has had to defend as well. Leo, I wanna thank you for coming on and helping us make sense of it all. That is Leo Schwartz, our tech and politics reporter here at The Information. That does it for today's show. A reminder, we are on this stream Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. If you can't make it then, episodes are available on theinformation.com, on our YouTube channel, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to follow us on social media, on X, on Instagram, on TikTok, and on LinkedIn. I'm already excited for our next show tomorrow. Have a great rest of your Monday. Bye-bye for now.